Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I was on LinkedIn last week and saw a really fascinating post by Samantha Falk, who runs a communications firm of her own in Vancouver, British Columbia. And she was criticizing the Vancouver Canucks. And they called, her post was called "The Canucks Communications Disaster." And it was all about how they handled the firing of Bruce Boudreau, who is the coach of the Vancouver Canucks. And it was really an interesting article about and lessons learned about what not to do in corporate communication. So I thought I'd have to reach out to her and connect and find out a little bit about the story. So Samantha Falk, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So tell me, why was this such a communications disaster?
Oh, there's so many reasons, Brian. But first I'm going to say that I'm a communications expert, but I'm also a hockey mom. So we follow the Vancouver Canucks religiously, and this situation had been brewing for literally months. There were rumors about the head coach getting fired, and there were rumors that kept escalating, and on it went, and to the point where his successor was named. The management had been seen talking. It was all happening, but he still was in his job, and it was cringeworthy and heartbreaking. And although the Canucks are having a terrible season, I will say, and perhaps change was warranted, I firmly believe it's all how you execute that change and how you go about it. And it was done with such disrespect for the head coach, disrespect for fans who loved him. And it was really awful to watch. So I just felt that I had to write something about it.
And what do you think they did wrong? It continued on for a long period of time is one of the things that you mentioned. What else?
I think their flagrant and public disrespect of him as a human was the main thing they did wrong. You want to break up with someone, you want to fire someone, absolutely, you're within your prerogative to do that. But it's really how you treat the person during the process. They treated him poorly. They communicated nothing. They let the rumors about the whole situation escalate without addressing anything. He was publicly disrespected. Fans were asking questions that went unanswered. So they didn't take control of the situation, and they really treated someone poorly.
And then you said even when they finally announced it, they did it so inauthentically.
Oh, I have to face palm. They did. They released a very cool press release, and they put a post on social media that was so inauthentic, so disingenuous, so rude. Thanks, Bruce, for your contribution to the Vancouver Canucks, when clearly they didn't mean it, because their actions spoke much louder than their very hollow words on social media. And if you look at the Canucks fired, there are 1,000 scathing comments from fans saying this is awful and you don't mean it and it's terrible, and this is overwhelmingly people saw through it.
Now, I was really impressed by how frank your criticism was. What's the response you've gotten to your article?
I have to say the response has been overwhelmingly positive for what I said. I seem to be echoing the sentiments of what people are thinking. I haven't had one negative comment or anything. It's been all positive for what I said. I think that people truly were feeling this way, feeling terrible for Bruce, realizing that the Canucks were making mistakes and cringing along with me.
Did the Vancouver Canucks reach out to you and hire you as their new head of communications?
They have not, although they should.
I think given your article, they should. We're going to take a break for some messages and be back in just 2 minutes with Samantha Falk of her own communications company called Samantha Falk Communications. In just 2 minutes, we're going to talk about other communications failures and corporate communications and what one should do. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I'm chatting tonight with Samantha Falk, who is the founder and CEO of Samantha Falk Communications, her own communications company. And we're talking specifically about how badly the Vancouver Canucks, she thinks, handled the firing of their head coach. And what she thinks is some really good corporate communications lessons that come out of that. But we might talk about some other issues from a communications standpoint as well. But I got to tell you, this is one really interesting young lady. She has been host of Body and Health in Toronto, a television show. She's been a reporter for Global News for 6 years. She was a news anchor for Global News for 10 years. She was head of communications at Hootsuite for 2 years, for Nature's Path Foods for 2 years, and now she's got her own communications company. What an interesting career you've had. Samantha.
Well, I have to say, I was sitting on the anchor desk one day and we had just gone through a round of layoffs at Global. And I started thinking that this was a business in rapid and steep decline. And I thought maybe I should get out of broadcasting before I have to get out of broadcasting. So I thought about what else I could do and realized I had transferable skills that clearly communication was something I was good at. And so I started applying for jobs and I got the first one I applied for at Hootsuite and made the transition into corporate communications.
And that's what took you from Toronto to Vancouver?
No, I was actually, I was already in Vancouver, working in Vancouver. Yeah.
For Global there.
Yes.
Excellent. And tell me a little bit about Hootsuite.
Hootsuite is amazing. It was a rocket ship company in Vancouver and definitely a Vancouver darling. And so when I joined, it was turning 10 when I joined, which is sort of is kind of a venerable dinosaur company now in the tech space. But tech is a really different animal, but it was my introduction to all things corporate communications. So I'm sure you know, Brian, that people in business speak in acronyms that I had never heard of, like ROI and KPIs. And as a broadcast journalist, I'd never been exposed to business terms like that. So it was an incredible education for me in corporate communications and corporate speak and quarters and all kinds of things like that. And it was, I call it my master's in communication because I was exposed to pretty much every communication scenario you could imagine: the good, the bad, the ugly, the challenging, the great. And I learned a ton. And then I went to Nature's Path, and Nature's Path is a wonderful company that really is a very purpose-driven company. It's the real deal. It gives back a lot to the community, and that was amazing. But I've had an entrepreneurial itch for a while, and so that's why I started my own thing.
You have as your byline on your LinkedIn that you believe in the incomparable power, incomparable power of storytelling.
Yes.
Why do you believe in storytelling, and how is storytelling different than the typical communications that people do?
I think, well, I know, and I believe, and it's something that I learned in journalism school from Stuart McLean, who was one of my professors at Ryerson, actually. And he taught me that. I love
his show. What an incredible opportunity to learn from him.
It was incredible. And he taught me something I have never forgotten, that everybody has a story. Everybody has a story. And so every brand has a story. And stories are what we remember. Stories are what we share. Stories connect to our hearts. They stay in our minds. And so I feel it really is how we communicate as people, as humans, and it's how we remember things.
So what's a story different than typical communications? You're saying the story is like a parable?
Stories like, sorry?
A parable?
No, I mean the stories, origin stories, founder stories. Companies tend to operate only like companies and forget the human connection that's behind the company. And I think people love the origin stories, how people got their ideas, where they came from. Hootsuite is the world's leading social media management tool. Well, that's exciting. But the founder grew up on a farm without electricity, and he used to go to the library to use the computer and taught himself to code. And when he learned that, he entered a competition and won a computer that they had to run off their generator so that he could be on the computer. And he went on to be a tech genius. Now that's a story. Hootsuite's a great company, but without that story just adds depth and a layer and a way that people can relate to it in a different way.
There's been a lot of comments just in the last little while about too many tech companies that are all about the founder, and the stories about the founder are the ones that you should sell, because those are the ones that have ended up having the biggest crater in the last year of the decline in tech stocks.
Selling the story of the person?
Or that there's too much focus on selling the story of the person, or too much focus on just the founder, and the founder becomes a megalomaniac or narcissist or
Right.
whatever those words are that people bandy about.
Right, like Elon Musk. I think well, it definitely depends on the founder, and it definitely depends on the story. But I really do think it can be hugely advantageous if told truthfully and authentically without embellishment, and I think people can relate to that. I don't think you need to deify a person or make them into as you said, a megalomaniac. I don't think it's about that. I think it's about really sharing true stories that people can understand and remember.
Okay, so let's come back to the article of issue. You had real problems with the way the Vancouver Canucks dealt with their head coach, but people do get fired, and you don't make the decision sometimes right away. It does take time to recruit a new replacement, and or you may not make the decision right away, even though people are clamoring because of bad performance or whatnot. So how do you deal with that kind of situation in a corporate communications role? What's the best way to do it?
Yeah, I think once you've made the decision, I think to be as decisive and expeditious as possible is paramount. I also think that you have to be as open as you can. I know that you're confined by the circumstances, but I think that they really ignored the situation and thought that people would stop talking about it, and unfortunately, it just fueled the situation. And I agree, these tough decisions have to be made. That I'm not saying that a decision wasn't warranted. I think you have to be more respectful, though, throughout the process.
So you're saying that fans in Vancouver loved him and appreciated him. Why, if performance was so bad and he deserved what he got?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and it's sort of an anomaly in sports, right? People are always wanting the head coach's head on a platter, and I've actually been thinking about that a lot. There's something just, I guess, inherently appealing about him. When he first came in, they started winning, and people were really excited, but then they started losing, and they didn't seem to have the same vitriol as normal towards him. I think he's a coach at the end of his career. He's
So explain this likability if he had bad performance.
Honestly, it's a great question that I've been thinking about a lot. And I think he has an inherent likability that, I don't know, people are attracted to, that he's kind of open, and he something, you just like the guy. I think maybe there was a bit more tolerance for the performance of the team because he has a deep history. He's been an NHL coach for a really long time. He's at the end of his career. Maybe people were cutting him a little bit of slack. But I think also there was an inverse relation to the worse the Canucks seem to be treating him, the more people seem to support him.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah.
What about the team? What about the players?
The players, apparently a couple of players were crying after he got fired.
Really?
Yeah. NHL players crying and saying goodbye. Definitely the fans were supportive until the end. Like his last two games, when he first came in, I don't know if you've heard about this chant that fans started, but they'd go, "Bruce, there it is. Bruce, there it is." And that became like this rallying cry for Bruce Boudreau. And his last game, the fans just started chanting it, and Bruce got tears in his eyes, and overwhelming support.
So I guess bottom line, number one, likability in anyone is probably an important criteria. But I guess bottom line, authenticity is what you're saying, is that being inauthentic just didn't work, whether it was during the process up to the firing and then at the firing. And so what could they have done differently? They said they couldn't have said we're shopping for a new coach. They could have said that we're disappointed with performance. What could they have said?
Yeah, it's funny, Brian, I thought about this. Nobody ever says we're shopping for a new coach, but what if they invited Bruce into the process and they were very open about that and truthful? And what do you think? I wonder how people would react to that.
Be honest.
I wonder. I mean, I don't think anyone would probably be courageous enough to attempt that. But let's say they said, doing so well, we're working with Bruce to think about what we can do. And what if Bruce was part of that process instead of being ostracized and excluded and made to feel terrible? what if he'd say, you know what, maybe if everyone was open and authentic and truthful and acknowledged that maybe change was warranted, why couldn't you approach it that way? Just because no one ever has?
Open, authentic, truthful. Sounds like interesting objectives in life. We're going to take a break and come back with Samantha Falk, and we're going to talk a lot about a few other communications issues. Stay with us, everybody. Back in 2. Welcome back, everybody, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Sagan at 6 a.m. Chatting tonight with Samantha Falk of Samantha Falk Communications. She's got quite a history in broadcasting, in corporate communications, and now running her own communications firm, Samantha Falk Communications. And we've just been chatting about the Vancouver Canucks and their inauthentic communications in regards to the firing of the head coach. Lisa, while I've got you, given your background in broadcast, I got to ask you, what do you think about CTV's handling of Lisa Laflamme?
I have a lot of opinions of that. I know Lisa. I used to work with Lisa. I'm very good friends with one of her producers, and clearly that was handled terribly. And the interesting thing, I mean, if I put my, the interesting thing about that was how, from a CTV's perspective, Lisa was in charge of that story. They were not in charge of that story at all. And she announced on Twitter that she had been fired, and she ran the show, and it was masterful. She did everything right. CTV did everything wrong. So, I'm really surprised that the people at CTV, who are journalists, would allow that to happen. Clearly there was no NDA. Clearly there was no any kind of equitable settlement that would have made Lisa feel respected, and it was terrible in my humble opinion.
No, I thought it was brilliant that right after that, City TV got her to be the anchor of the Queen's funeral, which I ended up watching on that station just because of her move to there.
Because of Lisa. Yes.
Was that a good move?
That was exceptional. That was the smartest move City TV could have ever made. That was fantastic. It was absolutely brilliant. And you're right. People tuned in when they wouldn't have probably turned to City TV as the source of information because of Lisa. Now,
CTV obviously thought someone younger, more youth, etc., was what their consumers wanted. Do you think they were justified?
I think that's not even the issue, to be honest. Sure, there's always going to be someone younger, pretty, or whatever. And it's your prerogative as a company or corporation to make those decisions if that's what you think is the best course. But it's how you do it. This is my point. I'm not disputing the decisions. These decisions are made all the time, and they are hard. But it's how you treat people
Okay. So then, what should CTV have done? You're saying that they should have had an NDA. Keep it secret?
No, I think really what they should have done is let her retire with grace and dignity. If that was the decision they made, she definitely should have been given an opportunity to say goodbye on the air. Apparently they said they offered it to her, but because it wasn't her choice, that's the hard part. But, I think that including someone in the process, not making a unilateral decision, it's like you can't flick a switch and just get rid of a person. It's an awful way to treat a human being,
particularly with someone that was admired and liked by so many consumers of her show.
Yes, and I bet they've lost a lot of viewers because of this, and that's justified. Lisa's a person. It's and again, as I say, it's not that these hard decisions don't have to be made at times, and people are often ushered into retirement before they want to. But it's how you do it, and it has to be with respect.
Okay, I got to ask you a question. Maybe it's a little bit inappropriate, but what's the role the gray hair played in it?
That's also a great question. I think it's probably a factor. Again, it's not something that's ever allowed in broadcasting for a woman to actually age and on television. That doesn't happen. So I think that was a factor. I don't know how much truth there is to the producer saying the gray hair, who let her go gray, and how has this happened? But I mean, look at how supported she's been. There's an article in Chatelaine this month, talking about how she's become this rallying cry for women around the world, not just women as well. That she's clearly super intelligent, incredible at her job, still has so much to contribute, and someone like that deserved better.
Let's talk about Will Smith. Tell me about that situation.
Well, did you watch that live last year?
Yes, I did.
Do you still remember that feeling you had in your stomach where you couldn't believe that had just happened? That was incredibly shocking. But I think what was even more shocking to me is the lack of remorse or heartfelt apology. I think so much can be forgiven if you are open and direct and genuine and authentic. And if Will Smith had come out and had a heartfelt apology in a very timely fashion, I think we all would have gotten to a place of forgiveness. And instead, he came out and accepted his Academy Award and didn't really acknowledge what had just happened. And although the world was still shocked, he didn't apologize in the days after. There was nothing, and I think it's still hanging on his reputation. And I also blame, the Academy Awards themselves for I think he should have not been allowed to. I think he should have been escorted from the building. You assault somebody, I think you should be asked to leave. I think that the Academy bore some responsibility in that too, but it just seemed that he just wasn't attached to reality. And I think he was not getting good advice, or he was ignoring good advice.
What do you do when somebody attacks your wife, even if they're a comedian?
I think the joke was offside, and I think you're absolutely within your rights to say something or get up and leave. But I don't think assault is ever an answer. I mean, that's a criminal offense. He could have been arrested for hitting somebody.
What should Chris Rock have done, if anything?
I think Chris Rock handled it as best he could have. I mean, he was clearly in shock too. And he was more gracious, I think, in his handling of it than anybody else, really. So there's not much I think I would recommend Chris Rock having changed.
So the lesson is, if you need to apologize, do it authentically and quickly.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Kanye West.
Oh, that one makes my stomach turn, I have to say. I don't think Kanye can be saved at this point with an apology, and I don't think I'd believe his apology. But I think he has some complicated issues that are in need of some really good help on a whole bunch of different levels.
So nothing you can do from a communication standpoint.
At this stage, I'm not sure. I wonder, I think, there's something that we have to acknowledge too. It's whether the person wants somebody to help them. And I don't know if Kanye is ready to recognize
help.
So, yeah, I'm not sure if he's at that stage yet, but hopefully he'll get there. And then, I hope that he gets the help he needs in all capacities. And then a communications person perhaps could help him change perception around him if he does some real work on himself, I think, first.
Okay. Elon Musk.
Oh, wow. What do you think about that? I mean, how much value has Tesla lost in the past year?
Well, it's had a premium to other car stocks, and it's now trading at the same level, same multiples as other car stocks almost.
And a very large portion of that is not just production issues and supply chain issues that, every car company is facing. It's really the perception of Elon Musk. A lot of people don't want, it used to be the premium auto that everybody wanted because it was so sexy and it was so cool and it had this cachet. And now it's kind of the opposite. Elon Musk was revered, and now I think the pendulum has swung and his personal brand has overshadowed his car company now.
Is this because of Twitter or other things?
I think it's partially because of Twitter. That doesn't seem like the most prudent business decision. He overpaid for something and fully admits that he overpaid for something. So you wonder about his business acumen in that capacity. But I think it's more what he says on Twitter and how he uses the tool. So I think a lot of people are realizing his true colors, and that he doesn't like to take advice, and he's not as admired as he used to be.
So we've had a whole bunch of people, a bunch of stars that have had communications disasters that you've mentioned. Lisa LaFlamme, well, CTV, I guess, not Lisa LaFlamme. She's been a success. Will Smith and Chris Rock, you said, did well. Elon Musk, Kanye West. But a lot of these people, CTV as one example, are in communications. One should think they would be spectacular at communications. Why do so many people that are either, in communications or in broadcast or stars in Hollywood, why are they so bad?
That's a good question. I think from, I've worked with some people who have been in some sticky situations, and I think sometimes you are just so emotionally involved, you can't see clearly. And maybe that's what happened to CTV. Maybe they got into a big fight with Lisa and they felt that they were right because they could do whatever they wanted, and maybe they couldn't see, the bigger picture and how it could be perceived. Because I think emotion clouds a lot of things. You take things very personally, and it definitely clouds judgment.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with this one, but I got to ask you about it because I've been really stymied. I've been stumped by it. The former chief of police in Ottawa during a year ago, effectively during the trucker convoy and the whole occupation, or whatever you want to call it, in Ottawa, hired Navigator, a communications crisis management consulting company. And yeah, his communications was terrible. So he reached out to get some of the best people, supposedly, but it ended up not working. What did you think of that whole situation?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question too. And I wonder if, if I would have given differing advice in that situation, or I wonder if people just sometimes don't take the advice that they're given, because that can happen too. I think of Hockey Canada, also another example that hired a really expensive firm, and Hockey Canada has done an abysmal job of their communication. So that's a good question. I mean, I guess it depends on I don't know what kind of advice they were given. I don't know what kind of advice was happening. I'd be really curious to be in the room and hear that, and whether I disagree, because I think we even all of us with communication experience, we have differing views on situations. And I'm not saying mine's right, but we all have our own approaches.
Let's try to turn it into a positive then. Is there someone in this past year that you think has done incredibly good communications?
Oh, that's a great question. I was actually thinking about this week, trying to find some good communication stories. And most of the ones that stick with me are old. So I don't know why I'm not seeing any examples. I'd have to take some time to dig some up. But I remember one story that was good was at the beginning of my career. And you hold these lessons and you think about these things over the years, but you probably didn't even hear about this in Ontario. But a long time ago, I think it was 2005, a BC ferry crashed into a dock at Horseshoe Bay. Right. It was a big accident. It got tons of coverage. I mean, I covered it as a young reporter. I'm doing live hits all day. And at the time, it struck me, the CEO of BC Ferries came out and talked and was open and answered questions. And I've seen so many executives in situation after situation refuse to do that. And he did. And it ended up not being scandalous. It ended up being actually kind of a good news story, because although it crashed into a dock and took out like 25 boats, nobody was hurt. Nobody was killed. It was just, it was physical damage, but the ferry actually sustained limited damage. It was the best case scenario. It could have gone into the dock full of people and passengers and cars, and it was a crisis that was handled really well. And I realized way back then the power of answering questions and standing there during the hard time, and looking people in the eye. And if you don't have the answer, saying you're going to get the answer, or I don't know at this point, but I will find out. And I've never forgotten that.
So many executives don't want to stand up and admit they don't have the answers.
No,
they want to wait till they get the answers before they come out and say anything.
Right, absolutely. And I don't think that is ever the best strategy. You want to, to tell the world that you are on it and you're learning, and you don't have all the answers right now, but you're going to try your best to get them. And it's a developing situation, but this is your job to be involved in this. I don't know why people are so reticent to do that.
That's an interesting Interesting conclusion. We're going to take a final break, and come back with some concluding comments with Samantha Falk in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. We're talking about communications, corporate communications, and I guess communications from anybody. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I'm chatting tonight with Samantha Falk of Samantha Falk Communications. She's got quite a long and interesting background as an anchor and a reporter at Global, as head of communications at Hootsuite, and now she runs her own communications firm, Samantha Falk Communications. I reached out to her because she wrote a really interesting article about how the Vancouver Canucks did a terrible job in communicating the firing of their head coach, and it was really quite interesting criticism that I agreed with completely, and so I wanted to reach out and find out. Samantha, I wonder, you talk about as we discussed a little bit earlier about how storytelling is what you think is the key to communications, but it also sounds like being quick off the mark, being authentic, being truthful are some other lessons. How would you, if I had a crisis and came to you with a crisis, what would you talk about? How would you advise me? How would you advise a company in thinking through how best to deal with a communications crisis?
Well, it depends on the crisis, but I'd have to say I think you have to be timely, because the longer you don't address issues, the more speculation there is, the more it fuels the fire, the more the ball continues to roll. You're never going to avoid things or stop things by not dealing with it. I think to be as direct as possible, to be as open as possible, to be as clear in your communication as possible, which means just have a very clear and concise message. But probably the biggest piece of advice is not to avoid things. You have to face these things. It's not going to go away. Putting your head in the sand is not going to work. You have to come out and deal with it. That's the most important thing. And call me. I'll help.
Okay, if I or someone listening wants to call for some communications advice, who do they call?
They call me, or you can head to my website, samfalk.com, and you can email me directly at sam@samfalk.com. I would love to talk to you.
Samfalk.com. Sounds good. I got to ask you one last question.
Sure.
On your resume, it says as well that you were a ski instructor at Whistler.
I am. Yes. So that's a good story. I never learned to ski when I was growing up, and I have a couple of kids, and when my older son was 5, I put him in ski lessons, and I thought, I'd love to take a ski lesson, and maybe one day, maybe I can ski a green with him. And I got completely obsessed. And within 4 years, I had my ski certification, and I taught a year on Cypress Mountain here in Vancouver, and then 2 years at Whistler. And now I don't really have a lot of spare time to teach skiing, but I ski whenever I can. So it has profoundly and positively changed my life for the better, skiing.
So you're never too late to pick up skiing.
You were never too late. I know, never too late at all. And I love it. I actually taught the Adult Learn to Ski program at Cypress, and it's so wonderful to empower other people to find joy in skiing.
Fantastic. Well, that's a great way to end our show. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
It's been my absolute pleasure. Great to meet you.
Well, that's our show for tonight. Thank you all for joining us. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online, even from North Vancouver, at www.saga960am.ca. Good night, everybody.